Picture this. A young smuggler stands at the edge of Coronet City Spaceport, desperately trying to bribe an Imperial emigration officer for passage off a polluted, crime-ridden world. That smuggler's name? Han Solo. And the planet he's so desperate to escape? Corellia, one of the most important yet troubled worlds in the entire galaxy. Today, we're diving deep into the history of Corellia, a planet that gave us some of the galaxy's greatest heroes, most infamous criminals, and most legendary starships. This is the story of how a once proud core world became known as one of the galaxy's most dangerous sewers, and how it ultimately found redemption among the stars. But to understand Corellia's fall, we first need to understand just how high it once soared. And that story begins thousands of years before Luke Skywalker ever dreamed of leaving Tatooine. Long before the Empire, long before the Republic we know from the prequel films, Corellia was already ancient. This core world, located in the prestigious Corellian sector, was home to a people defined by one powerful trait that would shape galactic history: wanderlust. The Corellians couldn't sit still. They were explorers by nature, driven by an insatiable curiosity about what lay beyond the horizon. In their earliest days, before they ever reached the stars, Corellians sailed across vast oceans in primitive vessels, discovering new continents and pushing the boundaries of their world. They became master fishermen, traversing dangerous seas to catch vast quantities of fish. But more importantly, they developed the skills that would later make them the galaxy's greatest pilots: the ability to navigate by instinct, to read currents and weather patterns, and to push their vessels to the absolute limit. But the seas weren't enough to contain their restless spirits. When space travel finally arrived, everything changed. Corellian royalty, including the legendary Prince Admiral Jonas Solo, yes, that's Han's distant ancestor, sponsored massive exploration and colonization efforts. This wasn't just about expanding territory. This was about feeding the Corellian soul's need to discover, to explore, to push into the unknown. Corellian scouts didn't just explore the galaxy, they literally paved the hyperspace routes that would connect civilizations for millennia to come. Think about the significance of this. Every time you see a ship jump to hyperspace in Star Wars, there's a good chance it's following a route first mapped by a Corellian scout centuries or even millennia earlier. The Corellian Run and the Corellian Trade Spine, two of the galaxy's most important hyperspace routes, bear the planet's name for good reason. Thousands of worlds were settled by Corellian colonists who carried their wanderlust and their shipbuilding expertise to the far corners of the galaxy. They were the pioneers who helped build the foundation of galactic civilization itself. Corellia wasn't just participating in the Old Republic's expansion, they were leading it. The planet's massive shipyards became legendary throughout the galaxy. While other worlds might specialize in agriculture or mining or manufacturing, Corellia's identity was tied to the ships that carried civilization to the stars. Generation after generation of Corellian shipwrights perfected their craft, building vessels that were faster, more reliable, and more innovative than anything else in the galaxy. But here's where things get interesting and ultimately tragic. As millennia passed, Corellia's golden age began to fade. The ancient royal bloodlines, including Han's own lineage, began to disappear into history. One by one, the great houses that had sponsored exploration fleets and colonization efforts either died out or lost their power. Eventually, the throne itself stood empty, a symbol of a glory that had passed into legend. Power in the galaxy began to shift to younger, more vibrant worlds like Coruscant. The capital of the Republic became the center of political power, while worlds like Alderaan gained influence through diplomacy and culture. Corellia, once the beating heart of galactic expansion, found itself increasingly marginalized. The explorers had become the explored. The pioneers had become just another member world in an ever-expanding republic. As Corellia's political influence waned, so did its economic prosperity. The planet that had once been wealthy from its shipbuilding contracts and exploration sponsorships began to struggle. Poverty crept in. Crime syndicates filled the power vacuum left by the fading nobility. The clean air and pristine forests that had once made Corellia a jewel of the core worlds became polluted by industrial waste and neglect. By the time we reach the era we know from the movies, Corellia had transformed from a proud explorer's paradise into something far darker. The planet became synonymous with pollution, poverty, and crime. Its massive shipyards, once symbols of innovation and exploration, became tools for whoever could pay the most credits. During the final years of the Republic, Corellia was represented in the Galactic Senate by Garm Bel Iblis, a senator who grew increasingly concerned about Supreme Chancellor Palpatine's accumulation of power. But even senators from core worlds like Corellia found themselves unable to stop the Republic's slide toward authoritarianism. The Clone Wars brought new contracts to Corellia's shipyards, but they also brought new oversight from the Republic's increasingly militarized government. The freedom that Corellian shipbuilders had once enjoyed to innovate and experiment was slowly being replaced by standardized designs and government specifications. But nothing could have prepared Corellia for what came next. When Emperor Palpatine rose to power and declared the formation of the Galactic Empire, those same shipyards that had once launched vessels of discovery and exploration began churning out instruments of oppression. TIE fighters rolled off assembly lines where innovative freighters had once been built. Star destroyers, those massive symbols of imperial might, were constructed in the same facilities where Corellian craftsmen had once built ships designed to explore unknown worlds. The Empire turned Corellia into a factory world, its people into workers, and its dreams of exploration into nightmares of conquest. As one character put it, the Empire was a machine that turns people and places into credits, leaving the grass dead and the air polluted and the sea empty. The transformation was brutal and systematic. The imperial government nationalized the major shipyards, placing them under direct military control. Corellian shipbuilders who had once taken pride in their craft now found themselves building weapons of war under the watchful eyes of imperial supervisors. The creativity and innovation that had made Corellian ships legendary was suppressed in favor of mass production and standardization. The Barsha family provides a perfect example of how the Empire corrupted Corellia's industrial might. Originally positioned to become the richest family on the planet through imperial destroyer contracts, they were destroyed from within when Sliro Barsha betrayed his own family members to advance his position in the imperial hierarchy. He even sent a reprogrammed battle droid to murder his relatives, showing just how thoroughly the Empire's corruption had infected Corellian society. By 13 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Corellian security forces had essentially become an extension of the imperial military. Patrol troopers worked alongside local police to maintain order, but the definition of order had changed dramatically. Instead of protecting Corellian citizens, the security forces now served to keep the population in line and ensure the smooth operation of the imperial war machine. This is the Corellia that Han Solo knew, a world where crime syndicates like Lady Proxima's White Worms ruled entire sections of major cities, where children called scrum rats survived by picking pockets, running dangerous errands, and serving as expendable assets for criminal organizations. The White Worms operated out of Coronet City, turning abandoned areas into dens where orphaned children were essentially enslaved. Han and Kira weren't just lovers trying to escape poverty. They were representatives of an entire generation of Corellians trapped by their planet's fall from grace. Their desperate attempt to bribe their way off-world at Coronet City Spaceport wasn't just about personal freedom. It was about escaping a world that had lost its soul. The irony is heartbreaking when you think about it. Corellia, the planet that had taught the galaxy how to explore the stars, had become a prison for its own people. The descendants of the great explorers and shipbuilders were reduced to scrambling for scraps in polluted cities while their ancestral shipyards built weapons for an oppressive regime. But even in its darkest hour, Corellia never lost its most precious gift, the ability to produce exceptional pilots and spacers. That wanderlust that had driven ancient Corellians to map hyperspace routes had evolved into an almost supernatural ability to navigate the stars. Wedge Antilles, one of the rebellion's greatest aces and a key figure in the destruction of both Death Stars, was Corellian. So was Crix Madine, the Imperial defector who helped plan the assault on the second Death Star. The bounty hunters Dengar and Mercurial Swift both hailed from Corellia, representing the darker side of the Corellian tradition of seeking fortune among the stars. Even in the criminal underworld, Corellians had a reputation for being skilled pilots and cunning operators. Perhaps most importantly, the planet's shipyards continued to produce vessels that would change galactic history, even under Imperial control. The YT-1300 light freighter, better known to us as the Millennium Falcon, rolled off Corellian assembly lines during this dark period. Think about the profound irony of that. The ship that would help destroy 2 Death Stars, rescue Princess Leia, and ultimately help restore freedom to the galaxy was built on this polluted, oppressed world by workers laboring under Imperial supervision. The Millennium Falcon represents everything that Corellia had once been and could be again. Fast, reliable, innovative, and capable of going places other ships couldn't reach. It embodied the Corellian spirit, even when that spirit seemed crushed under Imperial boots. During the High Republic era, centuries before the Empire, we get glimpses of Corellia's earlier struggles with outside threats. The nihilistic Nihil Raiders attempted to infiltrate the Corellian government as part of their campaign to destroy Starlight Beacon. The planet's growing isolationist tendencies were already showing, leading to satirical songs like Corellia for Corellians. But when crisis struck, Corellians still remembered how to fight for their world and for the galaxy itself. The Jedi were able to defeat the Nihil infiltrators, but the damage was done. A civil war erupted in 229 before the Battle of Yavin, showing that even centuries before the Empire, Corellia was struggling with internal divisions and external threats. The massacre at the Greens effectively wiped out the Nihil presence, but it also left scars on Corellian society that would last for generations. These earlier conflicts help explain why Corellia was so vulnerable to Imperial control. A planet that had spent centuries dealing with internal divisions and isolationist tendencies was ill-equipped to resist a systematic takeover by a galactic government that promised order and stability in exchange for freedom. The resistance movements that did emerge on Corellia during the Imperial era were small and largely ineffective. The Corellian resistance operated around 10 years before the Battle of Yavin, but they were constantly under threat of Imperial crackdowns. Members like Miru Nadrinakar tried to warn their colleagues of impending raids, but they were fighting an uphill battle against overwhelming Imperial resources and local collaboration. Even smugglers and criminals found Corellia increasingly dangerous. Sanastaros maintained a crash pad on the planet, but it was clearly a risky operation. The fact that she kept it stocked with supplies suggests that she couldn't rely on local sources for even basic necessities without exposing herself to Imperial attention. After the Empire's fall, following the Battle of Endor, Corellia began to slowly heal. The New Republic, despite its many flaws, represented a return to the values that Corellia had once championed: exploration, freedom, and cooperation between worlds. The New Republic worked with local law enforcement to clean up the criminal elements that had thrived under Imperial neglect. Coronet City Peace and Security began linking its records to the growing New Republic database, showing a level of cooperation and transparency that would have been impossible under Imperial rule. This allowed New Republic agents like Nora Wexley to track down criminals and begin the long process of restoring law and order to the planet. But the healing process wasn't easy or quick. The dark side cult known as the Acolytes of the Beyond recruited followers on Corellia, including a young Pantoran girl named Kiza. Their attack on Coronet City in 5 after the Battle of Yavin showed that the planet was still vulnerable to extremist groups and criminal organizations. The fact that the Acolytes targeted the Peace and Security headquarters and successfully stole a lightsaber from the archives demonstrates how much work still needed to be done to secure the planet. When cultists could infiltrate government buildings and kill numerous security officers, it was clear that Corellia's law enforcement was still rebuilding from years of Imperial corruption and neglect. However, there were signs of hope. The cooperation between New Republic intelligence and Corellian law enforcement that allowed them to track bounty hunters like Mercurial Swift showed that the planet was slowly rejoining the galactic community as a responsible member world, rather than a source of criminals and Imperial war materials. The New Republic era also saw continued activity at facilities like the Santhy shipyards, which were visited by heroes like Ahsoka Tano and General Hera Syndulla. The fact that former rebels and New Republic leaders were conducting official business at Corellian facilities suggests that the planet's shipbuilding industry was being converted back to peaceful purposes. But Corellia's struggles weren't over. When the First Order rose to power decades later, they repeated the Empire's playbook almost exactly. They occupied the planet militarily, nationalized the Corellian Engineering Corporation, and once again turned the world's shipyards into weapons factories. The First Order's occupation was particularly brutal because they were explicitly trying to hunt down and kill Order 66 survivors like Grandeya, who fought Supreme Leader Kylo Ren directly on Corellian soil. The fact that an elderly Jedi survivor chose to make his stand on Corellia speaks to the planet's symbolic importance as a place where freedom and oppression had clashed repeatedly throughout history. The Resistance, inheriting the rebellion's tradition of fighting tyranny, launched missions to Corellia. During the First Order era, smugglers like Hondo Onaka used ships like the Millennium Falcon to steal coaxium from First Order cargo trains, showing that the Corellian tradition of using superior piloting skills to outwit authoritarian governments was alive and well. By 35 after the Battle of Yavin, Corellian influence had spread throughout the galaxy once again, but in a very different way than during the ancient exploration era. The Corellian Merchants Guild had become influential in places like Thieves' Quarter on Kijimi, showing that Corellians had adapted to the galaxy's changing economy by becoming successful traders and business people. And then finally came redemption. Following the Battle of Exegol and the final defeat of the Sith Eternal, Corellia rose in open rebellion against the First Order, the planet that had given the galaxy Han Solo, the Millennium Falcon, and countless brave pilots found its voice once more. The wanderlust that had driven ancient Corellian explorers to map the galaxy had evolved into something even more powerful: the courage to fight for freedom. The spirit that had been suppressed but never destroyed under decades of Imperial and First Order rule finally broke free. Corellia remembered what it had once been and chose to reclaim that heritage. The shipyards that had been forced to build weapons of oppression could once again build ships of exploration and discovery. Corellia's story is ultimately one of resilience and redemption. It's a reminder that even when a world falls into darkness, the spirit of its people, their core identity, can never truly be destroyed. The planet that taught the galaxy how to explore the stars also taught it how to never give up hope, no matter how dark things became. From ancient ocean voyages to hyperspace routes, from royal exploration fleets to smugglers' runs, from the depths of imperial oppression to the heights of rebellious courage, Corellia represents both the potential and the vulnerability of galactic civilization. It shows us that progress isn't always linear, that even the most advanced and prosperous worlds can fall into corruption and decay. But perhaps most importantly, it shows us that no matter how far we fall, we can always find our way back to the stars. That scrum rat who escaped Coronet City Spaceport didn't just save himself. He carried forward the true spirit of Corellia, the spirit that refuses to be contained, refuses to give up, and always, always keeps looking toward the horizon for something better. And in the end, that's what Corellia really represents. The idea that as long as there are unexplored stars in the sky, there will always be someone brave enough, or desperate enough, or curious enough to chase them. Even when the whole galaxy seems to be falling apart, even when hope seems lost, there's always another horizon to explore, another journey to take, another chance to reclaim what was lost. The legacy of Corellia lives on in every pilot who pushes their ship just a little bit further, in every explorer who wonders what's on the other side of that hyperspace route, and in every person who refuses to accept that the galaxy they were born into is the galaxy they have to settle for. In a universe full of impossible odds and overwhelming darkness, sometimes the most radical act is simply refusing to give up on the dream of something better. That's the true power of Corellia, not its shipyards or its pilots or its strategic location, but its stubborn insistence that no matter how bad things get, there's always somewhere else to go, something else to explore, some other way to live. And as long as that spirit survives, the galaxy will never be completely lost to tyranny and despair.